Hi, welcome to our next webinar or our webinar Q&A that we're doing for these all of these sessions that we put up for this semester. So hopefully you've had time to watch and enjoy Jade's fantastic webinar that we released 2 weeks ago. She's now joining me live, so you can say hello, Jade.
Hello, hi everyone.
she's in the lovely Coventry University pod that we've got on campus, which is our soundproof pod.
Oh well, I hope it's soundproof at least. Yeah. So So I seem like I'm in a strange little green room, but that's where I am right now.
So we're here today to kind of talk a bit about Jade's webinar. Like I say, hopefully you've had a nice chance to kind of watch it, to enjoy it. There's some really interesting topics actually that she covered, and some kind of challenging ideas, I think, that really need to be kind of brought to the forefront and are really quite important. So we've had a few questions in that have been emailed and sent to us directly on Twitter, so thank you very much. I have put up a Mentimeter page. Let me just try and get that here so I can see any other questions that come in. So for anyone watching this live, please feel free to shoot them over. Obviously, if you're not watching this live, feel free to bombard Jade with questions as well. Her email address is on the slide below. So please feel free to send any other questions you've got over to Jade, and she can obviously answer them herself, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We've got a full module looking at social marginalisation within the course. So I teach actually a few weeks on age, so I've got plenty I can chat with you about if you are interested in a conversation.
Fantastic. And I think what I should have said as well is, or what I probably should preface this with, is please make sure you follow us. I should probably put it on the slides, actually, is what I really should do. But I'm not always competent enough to think of things like that quick enough. But make sure you follow us on social media. If you've got hold of this, you probably do follow us on Twitter already. Please share with friends. Please, if you're any teachers, please share them. Please share the handle with them. Share it with them. Share the content on YouTube as well. We did all of those excellent webinars. They were a little bit longer than the ones we're doing this semester, but we've got some excellent webinars all from last year as well, or from or last academic year, earlier in the year. And obviously we've got our Facebook page, which we're just using as a bit of an interactive tool, really. And obviously Instagram as well. So please make sure you follow us on all those. And actually, the Instagram comment starts me off quite nicely, just to a point I wanted to make. So I'm hoping that those of you that have come across this will have obviously seen us on Instagram. You shared a lovely little picture, Jade, a couple of weeks ago. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that was the picture of me and my gran, actually. Yeah, so yeah, it's just quite a funny memory. My gran passed away when I was 18, but we were very close. But that was taken from, I think it was Age Concern or Age UK day trip out, and my gran at the time, she just joined this group and didn't really know anyone else, so she was like, oh, you should come along. And of course I jumped at the chance to get a day out, go to the beach, ice creams. I just remember being on a Thursday and managing to convince my mum at the time to let me skype off school. But some of the pictures we have of that day, that was one of the milder ones. There's a couple where she got me to, I remember us passing a group of motorcyclists, and she got me to sit on the back of one of those and get all these kind of crazy photos. But it's such a nice memory, and I think for me it sort of, it goes against those stereotypes that I talk so much about in the session around elderly people and people who are at the latter stages of their life. And actually she was one of those people that sort of dispelled a lot of those stereotypes and had a pretty useful personality. So that day just kind of stood out to me, and I thought it was a nice little thing at the end, and something as well for maybe anybody watching this to take a step back from our busy lives now and start to think, well, actually, are there older people in our communities or family that maybe we could spend more time with and learn more from as well, especially in this sort of globalized world we have now, and particularly with the pandemic on top of that. I think we've kind of lost some of those intergenerational relationships a little.
No, absolutely. And I think your webinar really did speak about a few of those really key, interesting points. And I think particularly that bit. I think you were obviously talking about the battle against ageism in a lot of the in a lot of the marketing material. And I think we sometimes need to take a step back and actually remember our own life experiences as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does reflect it in quite a negative way using such phrasing, you know. So I suppose the starting point then really to set this off, one of the questions that we've had in is, why is this so important? Why have you felt the need of all the amazing things that you know I know that you cover? Why was this such an important topic that you wanted to talk about, I suppose? And why is it an important topic?
For a number of reasons, really. I think I drew upon it within this session, but because we look a lot within the module actually, and across the course as a whole, within particularly BI geography, at social and spatial marginalisation, I felt that this was one group which can often go missing from that. So we cover really important key issues around race and poverty and sexuality. But in terms of age, there's been a great focus, particularly around geographical research generally on children and youth, and actually the elderly have been missing from that discussion. And on top of that, there has become in society almost a normalisation around age discrimination, and that for me was something that I felt I needed to address or bring to people's attention, because as I mentioned in the seminar, we've all probably done it at some point in our lives, myself included. It's easy to make sort of age jokes, especially around people's birthdays, and because it's become so normalised, people don't pick up on it. And in some cases, we could say we're taking things too far here, and actually, it's just a joke. But I reckon with the stages of a lot of discrimination against a lot of different groups, if those sort of what we sometimes suggest are banal discriminations actually develop into something much, much worse and can have profound effects on people that are victims of it, that we don't actually realise ourselves. We think perhaps it's a joke or something to be lighthearted about, but it can often be more personal to people than we realise. And and it can manifest itself into something much more greater. I also think with age is interesting because it's something that hopefully all of us at some point in our lives will make it through each of the stages of the life course. And we can't say that about many other social constructs. So that in itself is particularly interesting as we start to see more and more people within this older category in Britain, as the title suggests, an age in Britain. So and it intersects as well with other social constructs like poverty, like sexuality, that I've drawn upon in this seminar too. So I think there's definite worth in addressing this.
Yeah, and I think it fits in really well with this broader enlightenment with how we respect other people. This the changing attitudes that we are slowly getting towards, and that breaking down of those, like I say, those barriers of using, of how we speak to people. And I think this is all part of that. And I think it's a really key part of that bigger conversation that's being had. And I suppose, and this is maybe me from a physical science point of view, so if I might be completely missing the mark here, but I suppose because, as you say, most people in theory are hoping they will get to that point where where they are considered elderly. People therefore assume that it is okay. Maybe there is that normalization because of the assumption that we're all going to achieve that. Therefore, of course, I can take the mick out of an elderly person because I'm going to be there eventually. But actually, that doesn't help that person at that moment in time.
No, and I completely agree. I think you're very right about that. I think because, like you said, it's something that we hopefully will reach in our lifetime, and most people do, within the well, within the UK context at least, that yeah, it becomes something that we feel that we have the right to to, to comment on or make jokes around. And yeah, and I think that the whole idea as well of getting older is something that I talked about that should be celebrated. It should be, rather than it being something that we look upon quite negatively, or we feel is something to dread, that actually it should be something to celebrate, because not everyone does make it to those stages of their life. So why don't we see it as something to be happy about, or to I feel like we can look forward to as well. So yeah.
And I suppose, and I don't know whether you quite have the answers to this, so I apologise if you don't. But have opinions kind of changed over time in terms of how we regard the elderly? Is it more of a recent thing where we see them as kind of that marginalisation? We see, though, or is this something that's happened throughout? I'm not talking hundreds of years, because I'm not expecting you to have that, but I don't know, just as a thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have. I guess I don't have data to prove it as such, but I think there is some evidence out there to suggest that our relationships with older people have become frayed in a way, really. Generally, I think globalization has had a big role to play in terms of the whole cyber world, how we communicate with people, excessive use of technology, but also people traveling around the world more, living and working in other places. Usually the younger generation has meant that the older people, perhaps who haven't become so equipped with technology and new ways of communicating, like we're doing here on Facebook chat or on Zoom or however it is, feel separated from that and feel disconnected in a way. I also think over time, respect, and others might argue with me, but respect for the aging process and older people generally has declined, particularly when we think about how we care for our elderly people, particularly those who are particularly frail at the very later stages of their life. Previously, there would have been more support with older people living in the households, and that still happens in many cultures within the UK. But we're finding generally that there is more older people moving into age-related residential spaces like care homes and folds, or even just in care generally, so spaces that are designed for elderly people. And therefore, again, this relationship across generations is starting to break down further with this separation. So I think maybe with the increasing number of people reaching this category from the baby boomers generation is potentially putting further pressure, though, on younger generations to support this age group, and therefore maybe strategies before or plans before that older people had to live with family units maybe is not always feasible anymore. So that's a long way around the answer, but yeah, that would be my perspective on things, I guess.
Yeah, you are. It is a long way around to an answer, but I think you're spot on. I think you are right. There is, this, and then you use the phrase breakdown, and I think that's what I was kind of getting at as well earlier. That there has been this erosion of that, and I suppose respect is the other bit as well. This erosion of that, and I think that's really key. How things have changed over time, and it kind of just leads me onto one of the other questions, really, which is how have politics really started to play? And you did touch on this quite a bit in your talk, but I think, and we just have to look at we don't have to go into the politics behind it, but from the Brexit conversations that were had, you just had to take a glance at social media, and you would have assumed that it was a landslide. It was going to be a landslide victory for Remain. Yeah, we know the outcome as a result, and I think the tensions as a result. That's, I suppose, I was just going to throw out you kind of how much of an impact has that had on politics, and how much is that playing on those tensions?
I think it is having a major impact. So for those who did see the seminar or the that I put together, we did look at the fact that the older people over the ages of 65 predominantly voted for who for Brexit to leave the EU, and comparatively the younger generations under the age of 35 really voted to remain, and there was quite stark differences really in that, and I think that caused perhaps a little bit of tension at the time. There was certain researchers, I guess, were arguing about the fact that older people sometimes will look at life through what they reckon were rose-tinted glasses in a way. So looking at what Britain was while they were growing up and feeling disappointed about, or fearful maybe might be another way of looking at it, about changing society and changing Britain, and in a way felt that in perhaps leaving the EU, we might be able to hold on to more of our British values. And that's one of the issues that comes with age generally. We look back on situations, any of us do the same, on situations in our life, and we look at it through a particular lens and think, okay, that was a brilliant time, or things were much better then, or and actually over time our memories become slightly distorted in a way. So there's research done, it's older research now, but it talks about this idea of the landscape of memories, and there was arguments to say that this older generation were looking back on a Britain that no longer exists, this idea that you can we'd have less people that lived there, and you could leave your door open and you knew your neighbours. And I guess as we start to see a changing Britain and more people moving to the country, and and that bring many benefits as well. I think the arguments have been to suggest that older people were in a way hoping to kind of return to something that they felt more connected to. And older people generally, because they're becoming a larger group in society, they have what we call this grey power. And societies across the world have talked about the idea of grey power in the fact that they have now quite a lot of say in terms of policies, not just Brexit, if we move away from that, but just policies generally. So what we're finding in the UK context is that any government that's in, they're often designing their policies to fit with the needs and desires of the older generation, because they know that they are key voters. So in order for them to continue in power or to get into power, no matter what party they are going to engage with the older voters. And that can be through various different ways. But I guess in terms of economic policies, which promotes things like fuel allowances and state pensions, all of this, they are hoping to keep on board those older voters to ensure their own security and power, I guess. And perhaps that can also cause tensions with the younger generation, who feel that actually there's a lot of pressure on them now in order to pay for this expanding older generation, and whether we have the means or the strategies in place to meet the needs of this expanding group, I guess. So
Yeah, and but I suppose on the counter to that, obviously we're focusing very, I suppose, because of the nature of the presentation, on the focus on the elderly and that side of ageism. But actually, there is the other side of it, isn't there? In terms of ageism on towards the youth population. I know that's outside the scope of this, but we've had a question come in kind of about what about the other side of the coin. So I suppose I was just going to throw that one over to you, really, in terms of you've talked eloquently and brilliantly about this kind of point of view from the elderly, but there is that element of it towards children, to the youth. So I suppose where does that fit in, or what are your thoughts on that as well?
There's, like I sort of said at the start, there's actually quite a lot of geographical research done on children and youth. It's interesting with age course because the majority of the focus has been at both ends of the age course in regards to the understanding social marginalisation, and that's regularly because your group who are the economically active, I guess between 18 and 65, that group often have more power and more say in society. With children and youth, it's a social construct as well. So actually, hundreds of years ago, there was no such thing as childhood. Children were beings or becomings, as some researchers have suggested, not a being in their own right, not a human being, but a becoming. They were a miniature adult who was in some way growing into being a person in their own right. So this stage of childhood and youth has been something that has been constructed over time, and with it again comes stereotypes. So you'll have traditionally in the UK we have quite positive stereotypes over children, where we refer to them often as being innocent or this group that needs to be protected in some way. And that's changed significantly over time, where in the Victorian times you would have heard the phrase to be seen and not heard, and now we take a lot more time and respect for our younger children. Unfortunately, with youth, it kind of spins on its head a little bit, and this age group of youth, usually in the teens and early 20s, have often been regarded as in some way, how would I put it, delinquent in some ways. There's been this argument to suggest that this group are a group that need managed or controlled because their behaviour sits outside the norm of what is seen as respectable. And that can be small things behind how they dress, the types of music they listen to, and the fact as well that they often cannot contribute to society economically because of the lack of income or inability to work. And similarly with children and the elderly, these three groups are in the position they're in because of wider policy structures that decide what age you can be to vote, or what age you can be to work, or what sort of support or rights you have in spaces generally. So I think it's an interesting group to look at as well, and I think there's a lot that can be looked at in terms of the relationship between older people and youth particularly, and I think the media has a big role to play in regards to that as well, in terms of how they help to erode the relationships there, in terms of the way that they present youth as being dangerous or delinquent, and how that then impacts older generations in terms of the relationships that they have with them. So yeah, I think looking at the age process itself, it's hard not to engage with all stages of the life.
I suppose then, let's taking it back to our degree at Coventry then, really. Where does this fit in then with with the geography, the human geography degree, or any of our geography degrees? Kind of where do we teach this kind of material?
Over a few modules actually. So we have Living on the Edge, which is our final year BA geography module, and that's where we look at social and spatial marginalisation of various different groups. So that's where we focus on age among many other socially constructed groups, so like race, sexuality, homelessness. So that's a huge module where we go into great depth with it. But some of our other modules which cross over with BSc geography actually, contemporary environmental issues, which I also teach on, which looks at demographics and population growth. And this is becoming a key element here. And this, I would say as well, this session has really focused on the UK. There is a lot of work done on elderly respect and elderly rights and positions across the world. So across all three of our courses, we also look at people's experiences within the majority world or the developing world context, however you want to use it.
Well, I suppose that gives us a nice taster then as to kind of what to expect when you come to Coventry, I suppose, as a bit, as part of our degree. I suppose that the other bit that we haven't really touched upon, and I will leave this as the hanging fruit, as it were, for people when they come to Coventry, kind of what can we learn from other places? So I suppose that is what is intrinsic in some of our degrees. What can we learn from more aged populations? I'm not asking you that now necessarily, but that's kind of what we would, I assume, you will discuss as part of some of those modules you just talked about.
Yes, yeah, it will be something we'll cover. Every country has its own ideas, own policies behind how they're going to deal with an aging population, and it will be affecting a number of countries across Europe, places like Japan, the US, and it will be something that I would predict we'll hear a lot more of in the news and within policy making in years to come as well.
Absolutely. And I think that as you say, that we focus a lot on climate change. And I know I've talked about it a lot. I know you in your webinar that we did previously mentioned it, mine mentioned it, most of us do, because it's so intrinsic, but it's not the only challenge that we're going to be seeing in the future. We are going to see a whole host of challenges, and that's the essence of a geography degree in my mind. It's looking at the challenges we're going to face and thinking about developing methods to understand it, to research that, and to hopefully make a change, make a difference, make some, consider the big picture.
Yeah, and I think that's what we strive for as geographers, really, to make a difference. And that's what I love about all of the geography degrees that we have, because they're tackling issues that are not comfortable, and we don't want to be comfortable in life, and that's why we're addressing these issues, whether it's climate change or whether it's ageism, and trying to do something about that, even at this small level,
and everywhere else in between. So thank you so much for your time, Jade, this evening, and thank you ever so much for those that have joined us tonight. Thank you for the questions that have come in. We've had a few questions while we've been live as well that have come in that I've managed to weave in, which has been great. So thank you very much. The next webinar will be from Dr. Charlie Hill Butler, and hers will be more hazards focused. This will be going live on the 1st of December, so 2 weeks time. The following webinar will actually be on a Thursday. It'll be on 2 weeks later on the Thursday, so it'll be the 16th of December. But yes, keep an eye out for that. We'll be releasing that on Twitter. We'll be announcing it on Twitter when it's released, and it'll be on our YouTube page in the coming weeks. So again, just thank you ever so much for your time today, Jade. Any questions, please direct anything to Jade. She's the course director. I should have said this at the start. I should have properly introduced us. I do apologise, because we've done a few of these, Jade. I kind of forgot. Course director for human geography. So any more broad human geography questions, send them over to Jade as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Jade. Really appreciate that. It was fantastic.
Great, and hopefully I hear from some more of you as well. Like I said, got plenty I can chat about on this. So, but thank you for hosting today, Craig. Much appreciated.
Cheers all. See you later.
Bye.